A young nurse risked her life by taking a bullet for a stranger 24 hours later. Her life would never remain the same. When she woke up, she froze in deep shock. It was past 8 a.m. that Monday morning. In New York, Becky, a young nurse, was sprinting down Lexington Avenue already. Late for her hospital shift, she had no idea that in mere moments everything would change her life, her future, her entire identity. A few blocks away, billionaire business tycoon Maria Langford sat at a modest roadside restaurant, not her usual setting, but her friends loved the charm of it. The morning sun filtered through iron street lights as the three women shared croissants and business updates over steaming mugs of black coffee. To outsiders, they looked like any other successful group of professionals, but Maria wasn't just successful, she was powerful, and that power had earned her enemies. She was one signature away from closing a deal that would shake the global mineral market, and someone wanted her gone before that could happen. He was already there. The hooded man, mid-30s, inconspicuous, leaned against a lamppost across the street. No one noticed as he adjusted the strap of his duffel bag, or how his eyes stayed locked on Maria. He waited until the waiter stepped away, until the laughter at the table swelled, until her back was slightly turned. He reached inside his jacket, and from the corner of the block, Becky saw it. She had just turned onto 3rd Avenue, panting, nearly colliding with a cyclist, when her eyes caught something off. Her gaze darted to the man across the street. His body language screamed one thing, intent. Then she saw the glint of the gun. Her breath caught. There was no time to think. She dropped her bag in one desperate, instinctual sprint. Becky bolted toward the cafe. The shooter stepped into the street, both hands on the weapon. Now the crowd was too focused on morning routines to react. Cars zoomed by, horns blaring, but Becky didn't stop. Maria raised her head. She saw the gun. She froze, and then Becky leapt between them. The gunshot cracked like thunder. Maria's table flipped. Dishes shattered. One of her friends screamed as the bullet slammed into Becky's shoulder. The impact knocked her back, her body colliding hard with the edge of the table before hitting the pavement. She didn't cry out. She didn't have time to process the pain. Her vision blurred instantly, blood rushing from the wound as gasps rippled through the bystanders. The gunman turned to flee, but this was New York. A delivery driver on a bike and 2 construction workers nearby saw it all. One tackled him to the ground. The other kicked the weapon away as people screamed and took cover. Maria scrambled to Becky's side. She didn't know who the woman was, only that she had just saved her life. Stay with me, Maria said, pressing her scarf to the wound. Don't you dare close your eyes. Becky's lips parted, barely able to whisper, "Are you okay? Don't talk." Maria snapped, voice shaking, "Help is coming. Just hold on." Becky's eyes fluttered, and her body trembled as the blood soaked through Maria's hands. An ambulance arrived within 5 minutes. Though it felt like hours, paramedics swarmed the scene, lifting Becky carefully onto a stretcher. One of them asked, "What's her name?" Maria hesitated. "I don't know." But as the ambulance doors closed, Maria climbed in after her, ignoring her own shaken security detail and frantic friends. The door slammed shut. The siren screamed inside the ambulance. Becky faded in and out of consciousness. She saw bright lights, heard Maria's voice calling her name now, over and over, even though she didn't know it. "Stay awake, just keep breathing. You're going to be okay." She wasn't sure. She believed it. The ride to St. Luke's was fast. Her pulse was weak. The bullet had lodged deep near her clavicle. The paramedic kept pressure on the wound, yelling vitals back and forth. Maria clung to Becky's hand like it was a lifeline, as if holding on could somehow undo the violence. When they arrived at the emergency entrance, a team of doctors rushed out, wheeling her straight into trauma. Maria stood in the hallway, her hands covered in blood, her expensive blouse soaked and ruined, but she didn't care. All she could see was the moment that stranger, that nurse, stepped in front of death itself. Back inside the trauma room, doctors worked frantically. Becky's heart rate was unstable, her breathing shallow, blood loss was significant. They moved fast, BP dropping. "We need O negative now. She's going into shock. Prepare for surgery." They intubated her. Inserted lines packed the wound. Maria washed through the glass, frozen. She was supposed to be the one shot, the one dying. Instead, a stranger had taken her place. Hours passed. Becky was taken into emergency surgery, and Maria never left. The hallway security tried to pull her away, but she refused. She sat in silence, occasionally pacing, refusing food, water, or even a change of clothes. All she could hear on repeat was that gunshot, and that final glance Becky gave her before collapsing when the surgeon finally stepped out his expression. Unreadable. Maria stood. She made it. He said barely. The bullet missed a major artery by an inch. She's lucky. Maria felt her knees buckle. She'll need days of recovery, maybe longer, but she's alive. Alive. That word carried weight now more than Maria ever expected it to. She walked into the recovery room hours later alone. Becky was hooked to monitors, breathing steadily, her skin pale, and bandage tubes ran in and out of her butt. She was alive. Maria stood beside her for a long time, silent. Then quietly she whispered, "You don't know me, but you saved my life, and I promise you I will not forget it." What Becky didn't know, not then, not yet, was that this moment would change everything. The room was dim, quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of machines and the low hum of filtered air. Sunlight slipped through the blinds in narrow stripes, casting a golden glow over the pristine white walls of the ICU. Becky lay still, cocooned in warm blankets, her left shoulder tightly bandaged and connected to 4 lines. Tubes helped her breathe and sensors traced her heartbeat in steady pulses. She looked peaceful but broken, like someone pulled back from the edge of something deep and dark. Then her fingers twitched. Maria noticed at first she had been sitting in that same stiff hospital chair for the last 9 hours, her designer heels kicked off beside her tailored blouse wrinkled and her hair a mess of soft waves long since freed from their tight pins. Her phone had buzzed hundreds of times, news outlets, corporate lawyers, security analysts, but she hadn't answered a single one. She had only one priority now, the woman in the hospital bed who had taken a bullet for her without ever knowing her name. When Becky stirred again, Maria leaned forward, reaching out slowly. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Becky, it's okay, you're safe now." A low groan escaped Becky's throat. Her eyes fluttered. It took several long seconds before they opened, fully dry, unfocused, blinking at the ceiling. She squinted at the brightness, the antiseptic smell creeping into her lungs. Then the pain hit her, not just soreness, pain sharp and burning and unrelenting. Her left side screamed with every breath. She turned her head slightly. Movement sent white-hot jolts down her arm. She let out a weak cry, and instantly Maria was at her side. "It's okay, don't move," she said gently, brushing a strand of hair from Becky's forehead. "You're in the ICU. You've been out for almost 24 hours. Becky blinked, again trying to focus on the woman in front of her. "My name is Maria Langford." Becky's brow furrowed. That name meant something, but her mind was fogged. Maria saw the confusion. She knelt closer. "You saved me," she said softly, and then it started coming back like broken fragments of glass relining themselves. The morning rush, the man with the gun, the cafe running forward, the sound, the cold. Her entire body stiffened. "I got shot," she whispered. Maria nodded. "You took a bullet for me." Becky swallowed, her throat dry and aching. "Why would someone?" "It's complicated," Maria said, "but you were in the right place at the right time for me, and you didn't hesitate." "I didn't think," Becky muttered. I saw the gun." Maria's voice grew firmer. "And you chose to act. That's what makes you a hero." Becky looked away as if unsure she deserved that word. "Anyone would have done it." "No," Maria said, shaking her head. "Most people would have run." There was a long silence between them, the kind that fills a room heavier than words. Becky's breathing slowed. Her mind, while still cloudy, began to settle, and then it hit her. "The name Langford," she said, barely audible, as in Langford Global. Maria gave a faint smile that one. Becky stared at, her eyes widened slightly. She struggled to sit up but winced. You're the woman they tried to kill." Maria nodded again. "And you're the reason they failed." Becky blinked back, tears. The weight of it all was too much. The press, the police, the blood, and now this. Maria stood up slowly, walking to the window. She looked out for a long moment before speaking again. "You know," she began, "when I was 10 years old, I was nearly hit by a car outside my school. Some woman I never got her name pulled me out of the way. Just in time. She got hit instead. She lived, but she disappeared before I could ever thank her. My mother always said, one day you'll pay that forward." I didn't understand it then. She turned back to Becky, eyes glassy. "But now I do." Becky said nothing. Her lip trembled, but she didn't let the tears fall. Maria crossed the room and pulled something from her coat pocket, a small black envelope sealed with a silver clasp. She placed it gently on the side table beside Becky's water cup. "Inside is something that may help," she said softly. "It's not charity, it's not pity, it's gratitude." Becky stared at the envelope but didn't reach for it. "I don't want to overwhelm you," Maria continued, "but you need to know people all over this country are talking about you. You're on the news. You're a symbol of courage, of humanity." Becky let out a Shaky breath. I'm not used to. Attention. I know, Maria replied, but that's what makes your act even more powerful. You didn't do it for the cameras, you didn't do it for money, you didn't even know who I was. That's why I'm here, because someone like you deserves to be seen and to never struggle again. Becky opened her mouth, but closed it again. Emotion swelled inside her chest, tangled and raw fear, gratitude, disbelief, pain. It was too much. At once Maria stepped back and gave her space. I'll come back later, she said. You need rest, but before I go there's one more thing. She reached into her purse and took out a folded piece of paper. It's a letter from someone you don't know, one of my investors. He saw the security footage. He said you reminded him of his late wife, a nurse. He asked me to tell you thank you for reminding him. What courage. Looks like Becky stared at her completely still, her throat tightened. Maria moved toward the door, but paused in the frame. You changed my life in 1 second, she said softly. Now let me change yours. And with that, she stepped out. Becky lay there for a while motionless, then slowly her eyes drifted to the black envelope. She didn't open it, not yet, but for the first time in years she didn't feel like a background character in someone else's story. She felt seen, and the next chapter of her life had just begun. 3 days had passed since the shooting, and Becky was still adjusting to the surreal new rhythm of her life. Her shoulder HDHD. With every breath the nurses were kind, respectful, but now oddly starstruck. Reporters waited outside the hospital, like hawks circling, though she hadn't said a word publicly. Her name was now a headline, her act of courage dissected on talk shows, tweeted by celebrities, and even praised by a senator on live TV. But inside her room silence reigned. She hadn't opened the envelope Maria left behind. It sat untouched on her bedside table, black and mysterious, with a silver glass that gleamed every time sunlight filtered in. She wasn't ready, not for what came next. That morning her door opened quietly. She looked up, expecting another nurse. Instead, Maria Langford stepped inside, polished as always, but today dressed in soft gray cashmere and quiet grace. Behind her were two men, one in a tailored navy suit holding a leather portfolio, and the other with a briefcase and a subtle earpiece. Becky's eyes widened. Maria, you're back. I told you I would be. Maria smiled. She nodded to the men. I hope it's okay. I brought some people. I thought today we begin. Begin what? Becky asked cautiously, her heart quickening. Maria crossed the room and sat beside her. The banker stepped forward and quietly placed the briefcase on the bed tray. I know this is a lot, Becky, but I want you to listen first and speak second. Becky blinked, overwhelmed. Already Maria opened the briefcase. Inside was a single document, the title, deed to a penthouse apartment at 432 Park Avenue, and beneath that a printed bank transfer confirmation bearing Becky's full name. The number at the bottom read $20 million. Becky froze. She stared at it, then at Maria. What is this? It's yours, Maria said, calm but firm. The money has already been wired. It's secure, legal, no strings. Becky shook her head slowly, her breath catching. I can't. This isn't. I don't deserve this. You stepped into a bullet. Maria replied, you didn't know who I was. You had no reason to act, but you did. You changed everything. This isn't charity, Becky. It's a thank you. It's freedom. You deserve a life free of worry. Tears stung Becky's eyes, but she kept them in. You don't have to do this. I know I don't, Maria said, but I want to. The private banker added quietly, the deed has been signed. It's a 2-bedroom, fully furnished penthouse overlooking Central Park. Move-in ready. Staff included. We've handled the legal transfer. Becky sat motionless, trembling. I don't even know what to say, she whispered. Then don't say anything yet, Maria replied. Just let it settle. Becky looked down at her hospital gown, at her bandaged arm, at the for dripping slowly into her vein. Her world had always been built around doing more with less, rationing food, working double shifts, watching her mother sell jewelry just to pay the rent, and now this $20 million, a luxury penthouse. Her life rewritten in an instant. I was just doing my job, she said, voice barely above a whisper. No, Becky, Maria replied gently. You weren't on the clock. You weren't in scrubs. You weren't trained to jump in front of a gun. You did what heroes do. You acted, and this world needs to honor that. A knock came at the door. Nurse peeked in. There's a visitor, she said. She says she's family. Before Becky could ask, her mother burst into the room. Becky, she cried, rushing to her daughter's side. Oh, my baby, my God, I've been on the first flight I could catch. Maria sent me a jet. Can you believe that? Becky's heart cracked open. Mom, she said, and the two women embraced. Carefully, her mother was shaking. You're Alive, you're here, they said I didn't know if I'd ever. I'm okay. Becky whispered, I'm here. Maria stood back, quietly letting the moment pass. Becky's mother turned to her, eyes wide. You're Maria Langford. I am. You saved my daughter. No, Maria said softly, she saved me. The banker quietly excused himself, leaving the briefcase on the table. Maria stepped to the side, letting Becky and her mother sit together in quiet. Or the moment was raw, messy, unfiltered, just like life. Becky's mother looked down at the documents. What is all this? Maria spoke carefully. A thank you, a home, a future. The older woman's hand flew to her chest. $20 million she earned it. Becky covered her face with her hands, tears finally escaping. I still feel like this is a dream, she said, like I'm going to wake up back in my apartment with the leaky roof and 6 missed calls from the student loan company. Maria sat down beside her again. You won't. Later that week, Becky was discharged. The hospital lobby was chaos. Flashbulbs popped, news vans lined the sidewalk, strangers held up signs that read, thank you, Becky, and nurse hero. She froze, overwhelmed, but Maria was already at her side, shielding her. Security cleared a path to the waiting limousine, sleek black and humming with quiet power. Becky stepped into it, her mother holding her hand. Maria climbed in last as the door shut behind them. The city outside seemed to blur inside the car. It was calm, warm, safe. They didn't talk much, no one needed to fill the silence. Maria reached into his side compartment and pulled out a velvet pouch. She handed it to Becky. Without a word, inside was a key. I thought it should feel like a beginning, Maria said. Becky held it in her palm, stunned. It does. The limo pulled away from the hospital, rolling slowly through the streets of Manhattan. People cheered as it passed. Maria looked out the window, then turned back to Becky. You're not the same woman who ran down that sidewalk, she said. That woman was already brave, but this woman is unstoppable. Becky met her eyes, still disbelieving. Thank you, she said at last. Not just for the money or the house, but for seeing me. Maria nodded once, her voice steady. The world sees you now, but I saw you first, and for the first time in her life, Becky believed it. The nurse who once struggled to pay rent, who lived off vending machine dinners and night shifts, who put others before herself every single day. That nurse had become something else, not because of the headlines or the cameras, but because one act of courage had opened a door, and this was only the beginning. The ballroom pulsed with applause. Becky stood still on the center stage of the global healthcare summit, light pouring down on her like sunrise. Her breath was slow but steady. Her hands no longer trembled when holding a microphone. The world no longer frightened her. Hundreds of the world's top doctors, humanitarians, and healthy care pioneers had gathered in the Shining Glass Hotel in Geneva, but they weren't there to celebrate research or innovation. They had come for her, the nurse who had taken a bullet for a stranger, and the woman who turned that moment into a mission. Behind Becky, the large screen faded into the conference logo, restoring humanity and healthcare, and below it in bold gold letters, keynote Becky Hart. She looked out at the rows of faces, media teams, philanthropists, politicians, and over 150 nurses flown in from across the globe, all waiting for her to speak. She spotted Maria Langford seated in the third row, calm and composed, wearing a simple black dress, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She hadn't taken her eyes off Becky since she stepped on stage. Becky adjusted the mic and began, I never expected to be standing here, not in front of you, not anywhere really. A soft ripple of laughter passed through the room. I spent most of my career invisible, she said, just one nurse in a sea of thousands, exhausted, underpaid, overworked. I used to dream of silence, not cameras. She paused and smiled faintly, but sometimes life doesn't wait for permission. It forces you into the light, not to reward you but to test you, and sometimes it gives you a second chance. She inhaled again, steady now. I didn't run toward danger that morning because I wanted recognition. I didn't know who the woman was. I didn't see headlines. I didn't think of awards or money. I saw someone in danger, and I moved. Silence, heavy, reverent silence, and for reasons I still don't fully understand. I live. The screen behind her shifted. A new image appeared, one from a few weeks prior. It showed Becky standing in front of a brand new shelter in Queens, cutting a ribbon beside a small group of displaced healthcare workers. The sign above read, Hard Haven for Healers in Crisis. Becky turned toward the screen, then back to the crowd. When Maria Langford gifted me $20 million, I thought it was a mistake, a test. I told myself I didn't deserve it. I told her I was just doing what anyone would have done. She looked toward Maria. But she saw what I didn't, that the world doesn't change from the top down, it changes from the front line, the screen. Changed again, photos rolled by of the many ways Becky had used her fortune. Images that had gone viral but meant something deeper to her. A shot of a nurse from St. Luke's crying as she received a debt forgiveness letter. A hospital wing being renovated with new ICU beds labeled the heart winners. Trauma unit. A clip of Becky holding a clipboard in a mobile clinic for nurses experiencing burnout, with nutritionists, mental health counselors and paid rest support. Her voiceover narration resumed. The first time I held that check in my hand, I thought about groceries, then I thought about bills, and then I thought about all the people I knew who wouldn't have the same miracle. Becky stepped away from the podium, slowly walking across the stage, letting the images play behind her. I paid off nearly $2 million in medical debt across St. Luke's nurses, cleaners, receptionists, anyone who ever took the night shift and went home to a final notice. The screen changed again. Now a short video of one nurse clutching a cleared student loan letter, sobbing into her hands. I funded a wing in the same hospital that once forgot my birthday 3 years in a row, Becky said, smiling, not because I wanted to be remembered, but because I didn't want another patient to die in a hallway waiting for space. A new photo showed a brightly lit dormitory for travel nurses who'd lost their homes to fire and eviction. Fresh linens, meals, free transport to and from clinics. We built 3 shelters this year, she said, 3 sanctuaries for people who never asked for help but desperately need it, and next year we're building 7 more. The room erupted into applause again, but Becky didn't pause for long. This is just the beginning, because we're not done. The Becky Heart Initiative, which goes live today, is more than a charity, it's a promise. She turned back to the screen. It faded into the foundation's logo, a simple white feather over a nurse's cap. A promise that we will train, protect, and elevate every frontline worker who gives so much and receives so little. From the inner cities of New York to rural hospitals in Africa, we will be there. Applause swelled again, but Maria remained still, watching, remembering. Becky returned to the center I came from. Nothing. My mother cleaned homes. I worked night shifts while taking care of her until she passed. I've cried in janitor closets. I've gone days without proper food, and I've had moments where I thought the world would never notice someone like me. Her voice cracked slightly. She didn't hide it, but on one morning the world did. She looked straight into the camera. And now I want to spend the rest of my life making sure it notices people like you. A standing ovation erupted, thunderous, long, and unified. Becky stepped back from the mic and took a breath that reached down into her soul. This was her moment, but it wasn't the end. It was the full circle. Backstage, she didn't wait for the press. She slipped out the side exit into a quiet hallway where her security and personal assistant waited, but she waved them off. She didn't want anyone right now except air. 30 minutes later, Becky stood on the private balcony of her penthouse. The city of Geneva sprawled beneath her, twinkling in the dusky evening light. The Alps shimmered in the distance, capped in snow, watching silently as the world changed below. She leaned on the rail, breathing in the stillness. Behind her, she heard the sliding glass door open. Maria walked out, holding 2 warm mugs of chamomile tea. Thought you might need something real, she said softly. Becky accepted it, their fingers brushing. Thank you for everything. Maria didn't say much. She simply looked out over the skyline. After a long pause, Becky said, do you ever think about that day, the cafe, the gunshot? Every morning. Maria said, sometimes I still hear it. Me too. They stood in silence. Maria turned to her. You've done more with your second chance than most people do with their first. Becky smiled. I had a good teacher. Maria raised an eyebrow. You taught me, Becky. I had power, but you showed me purpose. The lights below sparkled like stars. Becky looked down at her tea. Do you think they'll remember me in 10 years? Maria didn't hesitate. They'll be working in your hospitals, living in your shelters, quoting your speech. Becky laughed, tears rising again. Then she whispered, more to herself than to Maria. One act of bravery, one bullet, one choice turned a nurse into a legend. Sometimes the lives we save end up saving ours in return. She looked at the horizon one last time, not as a nurse, not as a victim, but as someone who took her pain and turned it into something that would never stop giving. And with that, Becky Hart closed her eyes, wrapped in wind and quiet victory. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you feel about Becky's journey, about Maria's decision to change her life, and how everything came full circle in the end? Drop your reactions in the comments. Below, rate the story on a scale of 1 to 10 and tell us where you're watching. From your voice helps us bring more stories that matter to the world. Thank you for watching.